What would you exchange for boundless power? Chane gave up his freedom for the power to challenge the Aesir. Shackled by Ursur, Chane is bound to fight the forces of light to placate his dark master. Stay tuned for top tips on how you can harness Chane's powers to help you win your next Monarch Draft. But first, shout out to our sponsor Fable Hunters. Spreading good vibes and the enjoyment of TCGs, check their link in the description below. What's up everyone, we're back with the last video in our War of the Monarch series. Chane is a Shadow Runeblade who sets up devastating turns by playing cards from the Banished Zone. Chane's hero power allows him to take multiple actions per turn and feed his deck to the Banished Zone in order to gain more actions through Blood Debt. Here are your top tips for drafting Chane. Number 1. Have a win condition. You need to have a plan for how you'll deal 20 damage to your opponents, especially if they begin playing defensively. Chane can string together some of the most powerful turns, but he only has so many before he runs out. Make sure you have some combination of cards that you can play from Blood Debt in conjunction with your other cards to plan out a big turn you can put together consistently if the opponent goes on the defensive. Number 2. You need Arcane Damage. Chane is the only hero in Monarch that has consistent access to Arcane Damage. In a set where there's no Arcane Barrier, Arcane Damage is key to closing games out, as the opponents will not be able to block you out. Make sure you have a variety of sources of Arcane Damage, such as Seeds of Agony and Rifted Torment, in order to push through your opponent's final life points at the end. Number 3. Not all Blood Debt is equal. Chane has access to many cards that he can play out of Blood Debt, but not all of them are as valuable as each other. Once you start banishing multiple cards per turn, it can be difficult to find ways to play out all of your cards. In general, non-attack actions are better than attacks because they have Go Again, and cards that have standalone value will be better than the ones that are dependent on the other cards. Number 4. Prioritize generics. In the common slot, many of Chane's best cards are actually generics. Cards that have Go Again, such as Brandish, Belittle, and Warmonger's Recital, all allow you to go extra wide on turns to push through your opponent's defenses. In the early stages of draft, these cards may even be better to pick than Chane's class cards. Number 5. Don't pass good rares. Almost all of Chane's best Runeblade cards come from the rare slot. Vexing Malice, Seeping Shadows, and Howl from Beyond are going to be some of your most impactful cards to be drafting. Because these cards are higher rarity, it can be difficult to put together a strong Chane deck if you pass these cards up. Number 6. Keep your cost curves in mind. Many of Chane's most powerful turns add up to 2 or 5 resources, as you will be wanting to fit Galaxxi Black into these turns. Keep this in mind when you're drafting, as you need to balance 0, 1, 2, and 3 cost cards to keep this balance. In general, 2 cost cards are the most flexible, but overloading on them will make your endgame awkward to play. 0 and 3 cost cards are the least efficient early game, but you need some for the late game, and 1 cost cards get better the more you have. Number 7. Galaxxi Black is your best friend. Chane's most efficient turns all involve playing a card from the Banished Zone and attacking with Galaxxi Black. This weapon represents 4 damage for 1 resource and has the highest rate in the set. Make sure that you draft cards that pair well with Galaxxi Black, such as Red Rifted Torment or Void Wraith. These mini turns help you set up for larger turns by putting the opponent on the defensive. Number 8. Friendship with Galaxxi Black is over. Dread Scythe is my new best friend. Dread Scythe is a 1-card win condition. The repeatable Arcane Damage unlocks many of the Arcane Damage synergies with cards such as Piercing Shadow Vice and Rip Through Reality. It is possible to play a very defensive build that shackles very infrequently with Dread Scythe. If you open one or get past the Dread Scythe early, it's a good idea to go into Chane. Number 9. Equipment is necessary. Chane is the hero whose win rate is most closely associated with his equipment suite. Aether Ironweave is crucial for many of your strongest turns, and Stubby Hammerers and Time Skippers also facilitate your largest turns on offense towards the end of the game. Without these equipment pieces, Chane will often struggle putting together enough damage on single turns to close the game out. Number 10. Just don't. Chane is one of the most difficult heroes to draft and get wins with in Monarch. This is because he is so reliant on both generics and equipment, but also needs a high density of Runeblade cards to close games out. Signaling can be extremely difficult, and unless you're receiving a bunch of rares, Chane can appear more open towards the beginning of the draft than he actually is. Err on the side of caution and only go into Chane if you feel strongly that you're going to be one of the only Chanes at the table. So you decided to draft Chane anyways, and now you're sitting down for your games. How can you increase your win rate? These are your top gameplay tips for Chane and Monarch Draft. Number 1. Play defense early. Chane is a hero that ramps up in power as the game progresses due to the Soul Shackle mechanic. When you're banishing 3 to 4 cards per turn, it is very likely that you will be banishing the attacks that you'll be playing, and that is where Chane shines. If you play defensively in the early game, it is more likely that you will be able to take a full turn's worth of damage from your opponent when you hit this power spike. Number 2. Attack Boltyn's Soul. Boltyn is one of the tougher matchups for Chane since Boltyn makes it difficult to play defensive in the early game. One of your best cards is going to be Lunartide Plunderer, and you need to leverage this card to force Boltyn on the defensive until you can ramp your damage up. If you can put Boltyn on the back foot, then you can overwhelm him when you start banishing Blood Debt cards later on. Number 3. Pop the Phantasm attacks. Prism is also similarly difficult to play defense against in the early game since she often threatens breakpoints that gain her soul and sets up her defenses against your Arcane Damage. Chane needs around 2 poppers against Prism to be able to keep on the offensive to buy time for his largest turns. Number 4. Blood Debt is your advantage. Against Leviah, your main advantage is having more efficient turns than her because you can play cards out of Blood Debt. If you can keep up a couple of turns of trading cards on defense and playing cards from Blood Debt, you can start to outvalue Leviah and set up your final turn. Number 5. Don't take damage early on. In the Chane mirror, you want to put yourself in a position to capitalize on your power spike around shackle number 3. For the first couple turns of the game, it's often better to play very defensively and block more, so that you can overtake the opponent when you are both hitting your Blood Debt cards. If you can apply pressure when your opponent is starting to banish Blood Debt, they might find themselves taking damage from both you and their own cards. Hope these tips were helpful, and good luck to everybody who Hope these tips were helpful and good luck to everybody who's going to be participating in the War of the Monarch pre-release events. Good luck to everybody who is participating in the national season as well.